So the James Degale Badou Jack unification fight at super middleweight ends up in a majority decision draw. One of the judges had Degale winning, I think it was by 2 or 3 rounds. And the other 2 judges had it even. I think it was 113, 113. First of all, before I get to the scoring and what have you, I have to say this was one of the best fights you will see in a long time. Certainly one of the best super middleweight fights I've seen for many, many years. Great, great, great fight. I mean, you had Carl Froch versus George Groves. The first fight was a good fight. Very good fight. I would say this tops that fight. This was a fantastic battle. James Degale got off to a very good start, as he tends to in most of his fights, James Degale. He dropped Badou Jack early. In the first round, it was. And for my money, Badou Jack was more hurt than James Degale or the commentators realized. I was looking at Badou Jack's legs and his mannerisms as he got up. And to me, I think James Degale caught him cold and he was pretty hurt there. Degale tested the waters when he came back in after the count was administered to Jack. And he tested the waters here and there and tried to see if he could get Jack out of there. But then he just laid back a little bit. I know there wasn't that long left in the round, but I do feel if he'd really gone for it, he could have put more damage on Badou Jack. But he probably thought that his opportunity to land a punch like that and drop Jack again would come some other time in the fight. So he wasn't overly eager to try and get it done there and then. But I think that was a missed opportunity personally. As the fight wore on, Badou Jack got into a rhythm of marching forward, landing body shots, accurate uppercuts as James Degale came in, and he established his physicality. I talked in my pre-fight video about Badou Jack possibly being the stronger fighter because he is a much bigger super middleweight, and James Degale has never been particularly strong physically as super middleweights go. He's been bullied in fights before, like he was in the Lucian Bute fight late on in that one, and even in the Porky Medina fight, he was bullied up against the ropes and whatnot. And I felt like Badou Jack, who's a big, strong super middleweight, he would be the stronger guy in the ring, and he certainly proved that here. He was much physically stronger than James Degale. He was using good, accurate, basic punches, but, you know, Badou Jack doesn't do anything spectacular, but he does the basics very, very well, and his defense is excellent, Badou Jack. He's not one of these guys with shoulder rolls and, you know, different style, you know, different techniques and style of defense. His style of defense is just the very basic, keep your hands up, keep your chin tucked down, and be in good positions most of the time to avoid the shots. And because he has such a good defense, he was able to avoid getting hit with most of James Degale's clean punches. And by the end of the fight, and I know I'm skipping a few rounds here, by the end of the fight, James Degale looked like he'd been hit by a truck, and Badou Jack was virtually unmarked because Degale's punches, for the most part, were not landing clean. He was landing cuffing shots that were half blocked on the gloves or sometimes fully blocked on the gloves. Sometimes he was hitting Badou Jack on the side of the head. There was the occasional shot that got through on Badou Jack's chin, usually an uppercut. But for the most part, it was Badou Jack. Now, it has to be said, though, it was in probably maybe the halfway stage of the fight where Badou Jack had a couple of really big rounds. And in those rounds is where he did the majority of the serious damage to James Degale's face. So it's not like James Degale was taking a steady beating through the first half of the fight and ended up with a bust up face. No, his face got busted up in some particular rounds where Badou Jack landed a series of very, very good punches. And he just kept applying pressure. James Degale has got to be one of the toughest human beings in the game of boxing at the moment. He is very, very tough, both mentally and physically, because he was in there with a guy who was applying non-stop pressure, who was hitting him with hard shots to the body, hitting him with hard shots to the head, not giving him a second's rest. And the kind of toughness you have to come through that, physical and mental, is incredible. As the fight went on, Jack, I felt, hurt Degale a few times, more so to the body than to the head, but eventually to the head. It was nip and tuck. You know, Al Bernstein, one of the commentators, I was flicking between 2 different streams watching this fight, but on the Showtime stream, Al Bernstein was saying that most of the rounds that Degale won were close rounds, Whereas Badou Jack was winning rounds big. When he would win a round, it would be by a margin where he'd really put a beating on Degale. Other than Degale winning the first round, obviously, with the knockdown, so that was a 10-8. And that is kind of how I saw it. When Degale would win a round, he would just nick the round with maybe the work rate, with Badou Jack not quite landing enough clean shots. Although apparently the punch stat numbers had Badou Jack throwing and landing more punches throughout the fight. But again, that all depends on how those punches are divided between the 12 rounds. And of course, punch stat is not how you score a boxing match, because it doesn't take into account the effectiveness of the punches, the cleanness of the shots, so on and so forth. So without getting too sidetracked, yeah, Degale was winning rounds by a fairly slim margin. Jack was winning rounds by a bigger margin when he did win them. So I can understand why a lot of people would feel like Badou Jack deserved to win the fight, because from a physical point of view, he bossed it. He was definitely the physical boss in there. After the first round, after the maybe first couple rounds, he was the physical boss. But it don't matter who's the physical boss. It's all about who's actually won the rounds. It's kind of like when Amir Khan fought Marcus Maidana. Khan ended up with a destroyed face, but I couldn't really see a case for Maidana winning the fight on the cards. Some people may say Khan should have been stopped in the 10th or whatever. That's fair enough. But in terms of the actual scoring, I thought Khan won the fight. I know he got hit with the much more hurtful punches, and he ended up looking like he'd been hit by a truck, and Marcus Maidana was, flawless in terms of his face. He didn't have a mark on him. To me, this fight with Degale and Jack was similar to that, because Degale, yeah, he took the heavier punishment, but if you score it round by round, it's like it was close. There was so many close rounds. So a draw, I can't really complain. I really can't complain with a draw, to be honest with you. Now, I have to say, I picked James Degale to win the fight. I did not envisage Jack being this strong. I mean, I knew he was strong, but I didn't envisage him putting on this much pressure. And I said that I expected to see the best James Degale ever, and I think we got the best James Degale ever. If the James Degale who fought Porky Medina had turned up for this fight, I think he would have got stopped. James Degale apparently lost a tooth in this fight. That's how tough it was. He spat his gum shield out several times because the pressure from Jack was so relentless, and he was very lucky to not get a point deducted. And perhaps the referee maybe had a bit of sympathy on James Degale because it was such a torrid fight. Yeah, I can understand why Jack maybe feels a little bit aggrieved, and people would think that Jack won because, as I say, from a physical point of view, he won. He dominated physically, but did he win all the round? Did he win enough rounds to win the fight? Clearly, I'm not sure about that. So without repeating myself, I'm going to open the floor to you guys. Who do you think won the fight? How did you have it scored? And since it was a draw, will there be a rematch? Will James Degale even want a rematch? Here's one thing, and this is definitely going to go against what a lot of other people believe. I actually think James Degale would have been better off staying in the pocket with Badou Jack for the majority of the fight. Maybe moving a little bit early on, but from the mid-round, staying in the pocket. And the reason why I say that is because when James Degale was on the outside, he was running around all over the ring, and he was getting tired doing that. And he was giving Badou Jack the space to land his straight punches. When James Degale came in, Badou Jack was constantly hitting him with this counter right uppercut. But once James Degale was on the inside, yeah, Badou Jack was landing left hooks here and there. But for me, on the inside, because Badou Jack's throwing, it gave James Degale more opportunity to land cleanly. And I think James Degale has more variety on the inside than Badou Jack. And the times that he did stay up close, for me, particularly in the mid part of the fight, even the early part of the fight, I felt like James Degale was safer up close against Jack. James Degale can handle himself on the inside. He knows how to tuck up and move around. But I just think the movement constantly all around the ring took so much out of James Degale's gas tank that by the time it got to the late rounds where he was standing with Badou Jack, he didn't have enough in the tank to equip himself and assert himself on the inside the way he would have done if he hadn't done all that moving. So if there is a rematch, if Degale fancies it, I think that they should switch tactics and aim to box Badou Jack on the inside. I know Badou Jack is stronger, but he's not as sophisticated on the inside as Degale. He doesn't have the punch variety. He's got a right uppercut and a left hook. He doesn't have all the different angles of switching this way, switching that way, throwing the coffin shots, the fast combination. He doesn't have all that. So I would say Degale should lose all the movement, stay on the inside. I know people are going to say this sounds mad, but I think it's a better way to fight Badou Jack. And I think that when Badou Jack does come back with his shots, James Degale should smother him. He should almost fight an Andre Ward type fight, although Ward is not as flashy and not as... He doesn't have the offensive prowess of James Degale on the inside in terms of combination punching and angles. He doesn't have all that. So I think Degale should fight that type of fight. Try smother Badou Jack on the inside, get his own shots off. He was doing it in little spots, particularly in the first half of the fight. But as I say, the movement took so much out of James Degale's gas tank that by the second half of the fight, him on the inside was pretty ineffective. So yeah, I've had a lot to say about this fight. It's a pretty long post-fight by my standards because it was a fantastic fight. A fantastic struggle. And Badou Jack is a better fighter than certainly I thought, not only in the lead up to this fight, but a better fighter than I thought since the first time I saw Badou Jack. To me, this was a better version of Badou Jack than the one who fought George Groves. And people have questioned Badou Jack's chin, and I think rightly so, but his defense is so tight these days that it's hard to get to his chin. You know, I know people talk about Carl Froch. That's a fight they would have talked to, and most people will believe that, especially after this, that Carl Froch would destroy James Degale, and that's fair enough. But Carl Froch doesn't have Badou Jack's defense. Carl Froch is way more hittable than Badou Jack. I'm sure George Groves will tell you that. Carl Froch is a guy who fights with his hands down. Now, I'm not dissing Carl Froch here. Carl Froch, you know, was an excellent fighter during his time. But styles make fights. And I think Badou Jack's style with his hands up all the time, every time James Degale threw punches at Badou Jack, he was struggling to penetrate that defense. You know, when James Degale fought the likes of Andre Dirrell, for example, he wasn't struggling to land on Dirrell the way he was struggling to land on Jack. He just couldn't land the clean shots because Jack's defense was so tight and he was so physically strong. So anyway, let me end the post-fight video right here. And as I say, leave the floor to you guys to debate what you felt of the fight, what you felt of the scoring, how you think a rematch would go. Do you think that James Degale needs to switch up his tactics? Do you think that Badou Jack can win next time? Or maybe you thought he won this time, but maybe you think he can win next time and win emphatically or more emphatically than if you believe he won this time. So yeah, drop it all in the comment section below. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.